Yeah, the most important one, I believe, was my father. I just lost my father in April, so I'm still sort of trying to deal with that grief because I loved him a lot. But he made the statement once, and maybe I was cracking up laughing at him, but he was so right. He said, "Betty, why did you do this? Because Northern Ireland has a problem for every solution." So it was kind of, my daddy was the one who said it, probably more than nothing, but I never believed that the things are impossible. But I always believe that people who are not trying to solve the problem are part of it. You've got to be involved in the solutions because we create the problems, so we have to be part of the solution. Like, it's not all the time, you know, nobody's brave all the time or nobody's courageous all the time. We all have our moments of fear, and I'm a human being. I have my moments of fear, but fear is a very crippling emotion. I mean, when I get afraid, then I do all the wrong things. It's when you go out there on a wing and a prayer that things fall into place, and when you realize you're not in control of this, then you normally start doing what's right. So, but I have days where I'm a human being and I think, well, why did I do this? You know, I mean, I must be crazy or whatever. But it's very fleeting, thanks be to God. And as I get older, it gets less and less because I wouldn't work at anything else. I have a beautiful friend in the Catholic faith. He's a Monsignor. And his blessing at the end of Mass is, may the peace of Christ thoroughly disturb you. And that's exactly what it does. I mean, you can't work for peace unless you work for justice. And of course, then you can't work for justice unless you work for peace. So they kind of go hand in hand. And you have to combine a lot of sound common sense with an enormous faith. Well, I haven't lived in Northern Ireland for a while, so I'm not really a person that should be commenting very closely on that issue, except that I do know more or less on a daily basis what happens because of some of my contacts over there. I have one particular contact that I get information from solidly, you know. Northern Ireland wasn't Gerry Adams getting up on the 31st of August 1994 and saying, I think we'll have peace today. That doesn't happen. That would be like saying Mikhail Gorbachev got out of bed one morning and suddenly said, hey, we're going to disintegrate communism. That's not the way it happens, you know. We would then be forgetting about the Solzhenitsyns and the Ginsbergs and those courageous, wonderful dissidents who chipped away at that communist bloc until it was so weak that somebody had to, perestroika was a natural to come out of it. And the same happened in Northern Ireland. It wasn't just, it was a case of the people getting together because they wanted to. And out of that, I mean, I was home to, let's just say, to bury my daddy, which was a very sad occasion, but there's a powerful force of good in Northern Ireland now. Maybe it's because the people have been to hell. And when you come away from hell, you don't quite know where you're going. You haven't got a clue. That's part of everybody's spiritual growth. I think my land became a land of a gun culture land, a land that used to be called the land of saints and scholars, flipped. There's never a happy medium anywhere. You know, it's either right or wrong. I think that's what gets the human race into so much trouble, because they're never looking for the middle road that Buddhism talks about, where you know, you have to walk that middle road. And in Ireland, probably that was the hardest thing to do, not to be a Catholic or a Protestant, not to have my own bigotries because of what happened to me as a Catholic in Ireland, to forgive that, to understand that people in Northern Ireland have a lot more to to unite them than they ever had to divide them, and that God should never be used as a divisive force. God doesn't start wars. That's the greatest load of nonsense. Mankind starts wars, but then we bless armies to go and kill in God's name. Somebody's got to blow that myth out of the water, you know. I mean, could you picture Jesus of Nazareth strapping somebody into an electric chair and throwing the switch? Because if you could, then you're doing his work, but that's not his work. That's not what he said, you know. Thou shalt not kill. That's what was said. And I've looked for IEs in there all my life. Never found any. Right. You know, i.e. you can't kill for this reason, you can't kill for your own country, you can't. And why do we say for God and country when we worship a flag, you know, and we're very patriotic. I mean, I don't care whether it's American patriotism or Irish patriotism, it kills. Patriotism kills. Patriotism should be caring about whether the man next door has a loaf of bread on his table. That's being a true patriot. Yes. You know, feeding your neighbour, because that's what it's all about. You'll find that the most peaceful neighbourhoods are neighbours who get together, neighbours who share street parties, people who go out and care, you know, who get into their own area and take control of it, economically, socially and culturally. Those are very happy neighbourhoods, you know. The estrangement from our neighbour is maybe a fact that if we get too close, he just might ask us for something. I don't know how these things happen, to be quite honest with you. I still wonder at why. Some very famous person said, nothing is as strong as an idea whose time has come. I think if I was being honest, that's exactly what happened. I gave a voice to something that the women of Ireland were feeling at the time. They were sick of losing their husbands and their sons and daughters, and they were in enormous pain. And I think probably when I yelled for peace, because that's really what I did, you know, that the women responded in kind. I couldn't say that Betty Williams started the peace movement in Ireland, because that would be another lie. The death of 3 children started the peace movement in Ireland. Betty Williams was just the voice, yelling out for them. And but I'm so grateful that God allowed me to go through that, because it's made I think about it now when I'm praying. I don't want to sound like a holy roller here, but I think about it now when I'm praying, and I thank God for the experience, even though at the time it was a very, very painful experience. But without that, we don't grow. It kind of depends on what you look at as opposition, you know. I think what people do is, when they're hurting badly enough, like the Northern Irish, where they'll yell out at you, there's an honesty in them. I often say even Northern Irish terrorism had an honesty about it that was, however sick, it was an honesty about it, you know. We're always saying here, in America it amazes me too, because it's such a great country with enormous potential to be a magnificent country. But here we talk about family values. Why don't we reverse that to value the family? Because if we valued the family, we would stop working at the wrong end of the donkey. You know? Here, things are more concentrated on punishment, where the effect is having to punish. The cause is the ghettos. You know, I say this in my talks everywhere I go, we've got to turn that donkey around or it's going to keep pooping. And the society's going to get sicker and sicker and sicker. When we take all the money out of building prisons and put it into feeding the child in the womb, then of course when baby is born, the medical problems are minimal, if any, if mother's looked after. I mean, it's only sound common sense. Then making sure that that child has access to good food, that the mother has access to health care needs, that the child has a decent school and a decent home. And surely your society's got to improve with that, and you're really beginning to value the family. Rather than talking about family values, you can't have family values with a society so hurting. You know, this, in Harris County alone, in Texas, we have 35,000 hungry children. Sorry, 350,000 hungry. So it's an enormous number of hungry children. And we have programs on the streets like Kid Care, which is kind of Meals on Wheels for children. But this is America. You know, when you go to third world countries, you kind of expect that. When I came here from Ireland, that shocked me to death. That there should be one hungry child in this fine country. We should hang our heads in shame, every single one of us. That there should be a woman without a home for her baby. That there should be teenagers so hurting that they have babies so as they can carry something that belongs to them. You know, I mean, that we have talk shows in the United States where people feel they have to pour their hearts out because they can't handle the pain. And we're not tackling those issues at all here. The reality of the ghetto, you know, the reality of still some deep bigotries. That's not being dealt with. I said to Father Tutu one day, you know, as an Irish Catholic, I was black. The similarities, injustice is injustice, and it comes in all languages. You know, it has no boundaries. It doesn't begin or end at one specific part of the world. It's all over the world. Bishop Tutu said a long time ago, and this is one of his dreams that I hope to help him make come true, that we should have safe areas for children when war breaks out. If we can have MASH units and Red Cross areas, what's to stop a government giving so many acres of land to the saving of children's lives? If adults can't get along, why do we drag our children into it? Our children don't declare war on one another. You know, if a 4-year-old could walk through into this interview right now and declare war on you, I'd look over it, but a 4-year-old doesn't, you know. I don't want, above all, to sound sexist, because I think that's another kind of violence. Everybody has their own ideas on violence, you know. I mean, I thought hunger striking is an act of violence against your body, but that's my opinion. It doesn't have to be everybody else's, you know. I think the women of Ireland had the most incredible courage that I have ever seen in my life. And it wasn't even that they knew they were courageous, because I think true courage doesn't think of itself as that. We could say it at our first rally, for instance. If you don't believe in miracles, I witnessed one day. And I witnessed a powerful force for good that was incredible, because in our first rally, Protestant and Catholic women who had never met each other before came together, got their buses and got to a certain spot in Belfast, and they were running off the buses into each other's arms. See, it was an incredible, powerful force of good that was there. I've seen incredible acts of courage from women. Do we forget the women of solidarity? Do we just remember the leadership? We don't remember those Polish women who were the underground and the backbone of the solidarity movement. Do we forget the babushka, who did not allow communism to destroy God's word because they carried it high and mighty? What do we remember as courage? I believe that women, as the givers of life, have never been the true protectors of that same life that they should be. Too easily we have allowed our sons to put on a uniform and take up a gun. Too easily in our homes we have taught the difference between boys and girls. We've said to our boys, don't cry. Why not? It takes a man to shed a tear. I then think of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a man that I adore. I mean, when I think of him, I just fill with tears, because his spirituality and kindness is so overwhelming that when you're in his company, you're the only person in the room, and there may be thousands around you, but you're centered so much with this beautiful spiritual force and a force of goodness that you'd wonder how the world would allow the Chinese to take over his country and to kill a culture, like to try and kill a Tibetan culture. It's so cruel, because that's one of the most magnificent cultures that ever this planet Earth had, in its gentleness and in its faith and in its humility, in its understanding and its love. The Dalai Lama could show the world leadership in how to love one another, you know? And I think of that kind of cruelty. And I think of the cruelty, not of the Chinese people, because the Chinese people are wonderful, gentle souls, but of a government that is allowed to do this and continue to have most favored nation status when it should be ostracized by the rest of the world, instead of developing a second superpower. We don't need any more superpowers. Tina Turner said it better than I could ever say it. We don't need another hero. If we have to have heroes, I want Father Tutu's mine. He's mine. What a man. What a man. The Dalai Lama's mine. You know, those are my heroes. Not the other guys. Not, you know,
Right.
not them.
Right.
I want to be just like the Dalai Lama when I grow up. And Aung San Suu Kyi, my sister laureate, if we have to use the word courage, she's it personified. Personified. 6 years under house arrest. The democratically elected leader of our country, Burma, took the vote, 82% of the vote. No man in history has ever pulled a democratic vote like that. On 40 indigenous peoples. I mean, we're not just dealing with one. We're 40 indigenous groups. And she could leave her country any time. The SLORC regime, the State Law and Order Restoration Council of Burma, military thugs is what they are. I've told her, yeah, you're free to go anytime you want to go. Sue says no. That's courage of the most incredible kind. I want any woman who sees this to say a wee prayer for Sue, Aung San Suu Kyi of Burma. I don't think I'd have that kind of courage. Nonviolence is not a thing that comes easily. You have to learn how to be nonviolent. And while the toughest thing I've ever done in my life was being a nonviolent person in Northern Ireland, the easiest thing in the world is retaliation. When somebody hits you a dig in the jaw, what your natural reaction is you want to hit them back. It's so much harder not to go that way. However, it is the right way to go. There is no other way. I've never had a problem with that because I've never felt myself any lesser than a man. Perhaps if women began to think that way, they would stop trying to act like them. I think most women now feel that to succeed they have to be like men. And that's the wrong way to go too, because we're not, you know. There's some very violent women in the world, but I've met some of the most peace-loving, beautiful women in the form of Aung San Suu Kyi, Corazon Aquino, not the Margaret Thatchers. You know, we want to be, if we're going to be a power for the good, it has to be a power where we show how wrong sexism is by not being sexist ourselves. I love men. And if any of them have been sexist towards me, they've been shown very quickly it's not a way to go. It doesn't wash with me, you know, because I won't do it to you. So I have to show by my example that I'm not going to be sexist, regardless of what you do. Where women now are getting that, it's done a huge flop. Like, I can't get the exact right words, but we've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. You know, even the rank and file feminists of a few years ago are looking now. Gloria Steinem's even rethinking earlier thoughts. I feel a woman's role has got to be a gentle role, and perhaps if we can do it correctly, the men would like to follow us or walk beside us. Not to follow, walk beside, I prefer that. Now there's another one that really sickens me. We all go to see these movies. I mean, I don't. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't get time to go to movies, so that's probably why. But I went to a movie a few years ago with my daughter, and I got sick, and I had to get out. I mean, I was just physically, it was so violent. But that's what we buy. I mean, people ridicule television and newspapers, and stop going to them. I mean, turn off the TV. Don't read the newspaper that's all full of what went wrong yesterday. And then yip about it being so wrong. I mean, it's like talking about the National Enquirer. How do you know what's in it unless you buy it? You know? So, I mean, I don't buy that either. What you read and what you watch are your choice. You know, it's just like what you do in your daily life is your choice. And according to the Nielsen ratings, violence pays. And so, of course, it's $1 again. My peace work, I believe, begins with me on a daily basis. And it has to be centered within me before I could let anybody else see that example. You know, it's not that I'm trying to tell people what's right or wrong. I'm trying to show by my actions that you can make a far better world if you just care enough. That's all you have to do. It's no big deal. I mean, it's not... I couldn't educationalize it for you to say that on a daily basis you can make a difference. You can. One act of kindness a day can do it.